Now, making a function to represent a value. So a function is something which compares two or more things. We're going to only deal with two things, okay? So not more than that. We're not going to worry about more than that for the time being. We're going to deal with two things which a function is going to represent. And so we can say that a function can be used to describe a line. Okay, it can be used to find points that are on a line. So in that previous example where we were looking at, how much fuel is left after 500 kilometers, if we had a function for that, we could type in the 500 kilometers and it would spit out how much fuel is remaining. So a function is an equation which is used to find one of the two variables using the other. So if we know the 500, we can find the 10. If we know the 10, we can find the 500. And we have to figure out a way that those two are going to work. Now it has to work for every single point on the line, as this graph is going to represent what happens on the line. Now we can think of the function as a machine which takes the input given and outputs the answer. Let's make sure to get that right, spell it right. The output and outputs the answer. Okay, so it takes something in and it outputs our answer. An example is a cash register, which takes the input of the type of purchase and determines the value of said purchases. It then adds tax, if there's tax to be added, and then outputs the amount you owe. Okay, so you can think of it as a cash register. It kind of takes things in, spits out the value that you owe. Okay, and that's a function. It does that using a function. The functions which we will be used are slightly less complicated than a cash register would, because we're not necessarily going to add a whole whack of things together, just a couple. So they'll take the value of the independent variable and we're going to produce the dependent variable. So we're always going to start with y on one side, and we're going to and then we're going to find what y is based on our x. So let's take a look at a couple examples of functions. So a function can calculate the value of a number of quarters. Now a quarter has a value of 25 cents or 0.25. So the value of a quarter can be represented with the letter V. Okay, and if we want to find the value, how much they're worth, we're going to take the number of quarters and we're going to call that Q, and we're going to multiply it by 0.25. That's what this is saying. Take the input of Q, multiply it by 0.25, and that produces the output. Okay. Now, when we write out a function like this, we want to simplify it a little bit, so we're going to put the 0.25 in front, and then we're going to multiply by Q, and this is the way that our function is going to look. So to figure out the value of a bunch of quarters, we would then do the 0.25 multiplied by the number of quarters. Okay, so let's say that we are going to have a roll of quarters, and you might not know what a roll of quarters is, but it's about that long, and it's worth $10. Okay, there are 40 quarters in there. Okay, so if we want to figure out the value of that, which I kind of told you already, we would do the value is equal to 0.25, and we would multiply it by the 40 quarters that are inside of that roll. So the value is 0.25 times 40, and we would do that with our calculators here. 0.25 times 40, and that gives us 10. So the value of 40 quarters is $10. Okay, and that is how that function spits out the value. We can use a different function, can be used to find the mass of quarters. Let's say we want to find out how heavy said quarters are going to be. Well, we take, if each quarter has a mass of 4.4 grams, okay, let's say that is 4.4 grams, what we're going to do is we're going to take the input, multiply by 4.4, so we're going to do 4.4 times the input, and this is going to equal the mass of said quarters. Okay, the mass of said quarters is going to be 4.4 times Q. Now this, what you see right here, and I'm just going to put this in a little bit of a side note here. If we see something on the left hand side of our equation that has a big letter and then a small letter in brackets, this doesn't mean multiply. what this means is this is saying, if m is mass, this is the mass of an amount of quarters. Okay? Sometimes we're going to see something like this, f of x. This is the function based on x as a number. So we're going to solve for what is this, okay? What is this function representing based on what x is? So if we say that x is 6, what is that answer? Okay, what is the function based on the number 6? If x is 100, what is the function based on 100? And there will be a couple of questions like that in your assignment that you need to go over as well. So this is right here is saying the mass based on number of quarters. Again, not multiply. This is the mass based on number of quarters. Here we multiply. We do 4.4 times the number of quarters. And when we do that, okay, let's say again, we're going to use 40 quarters. So you might see something like this. The mass based on 40 quarters. Again, that's not multiply. This is 4.4 times 40. And the mass based on 40 quarters, okay, again, that's what we're talking about down here below, is let's get the calculator in there, 4.4 times 40 would be 176 grams. Okay, and I should have put the value in there or the units in there, but we'll use it as grams, okay? 176 grams is the weight of 40 quarters. That is the same as $10 worth of quarters.